We have other compounds like tannins, for example. Very recently, we put out a paper looking at a meta-analysis of tannins as additives, not just tannins as part of forages, but as additive that you consciously put into the diet. And those also have shown to reduce emissions by about 10% or so. So there are a number of those things that are available, but I think what we need is basically more data, making sure that there are no unintended consequences, long-term data, and data on the impact on the environment, on the products themselves and residues, and also on the animal health as well.
Welcome to the Dairy Health Blackbelt Podcast, brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Dr. Luciano Caixeta, and I come to you with this podcast dedicated to bring you the latest insights and discussions in the dairy industry. Get ready to expand your knowledge and stay ahead with today's episode. Today I'm hosting Dr. Ermias Kebreab, who is a professor of sustainable animal systems at UC Davis, and he's a well-known scientist in our field, has been working with methane emission mitigation, and we're going to have a chance to chat with him and learn more about what he has been doing and his perspectives on the topic. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Kebreab.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's nice having you here, and you have been you are a well-known person in the dairy industry and been working on this area on the realm of the methane emission and mitigation. And you have been very prolific on those research. So, on your experience and from what you're doing, like what are some of the strategies that we have available now that has some science behind to let us to mitigate methane? Because there's a lot of things out there. They're saying that they can do this, but not always backed by science.
Yeah, that's true. I think this time we are in a good way because we have some options. There are some options that are coming up now. There's a lot of work that's been done around the world, which is really good. That there is a lot of interest in this area. So there is investment happening and within different areas to have the same outcome, basically to try to reduce methane emissions in different ways. So there are those that are inhibitors that inhibit the methanogenesis, and one that has already been approved and has been used in several countries is 3-NOP. It's approved for dairy cattle in the US and in the European Union, and I believe the beef cattle approval will be coming soon as well, because we've done meta-analysis both on dairy and on beef, and kind of similar, maybe a little bit more effective on the beef side, but in general, it's pretty, they match up quite well, and there's a lot of data behind it. There's probably the most studied feed additive to reduce methane emissions. And apart from that, we also have others that have collected a lot of data as well. Seaweed being one amongst them, and not just seaweed, but bromoform-containing compounds as well. So whether it is natural bromoform or it is a synthetic bromoform, those are also becoming, there's more and more data that's coming out. And what we know is that the efficacy is not really in contention. We've done a meta-analysis on that, and we can say that depending on the dose, you can achieve 50% or more reduction in emissions. So what is really needed now, is maybe missing, is to look into the long-term impacts. Again, those kind of work are coming out as well. So I believe in 2026, we'll see more and more of the studies being published that has good information on how long the additive would be effective, and if there is any unintended consequences and all that. So I think those would be clarified within this year. We have other compounds like tannins, for example. Very recently, we put out a paper looking at a meta-analysis of tannins as additives, not just tannins as part of forages, but as additive that you consciously put into the diet, and those also have shown to reduce emissions by about 10% or so. So there are a number of those things that are available, but I think what we need is basically more data, making sure that there are no unintended consequences, long-term data, and data on the impact on the environment, on the products themselves and residues, and also on the animal health as well.
Why Genetics turns podcast airtime into brand authority. We don't sell ads, we elevate voices. Curious how far your voice can go to become a reference in the industry and attract more leads? Scan the QR code and discover how we can turn your expertise into unmatched brand authority. Let's transform expertise into influence, starting now.
Yeah, and then on this long-term data that you mentioned, is that saying you use the product for a certain amount of time and there's a effect of it stays with the animal for longer since you stop feeding those additives?
Yes, exactly. So what happens when you do controlled experiments is that normally it's about 3 to 4 months. That is sort of the normal duration of the controlled experiments. But obviously, you want to use this throughout the animal's lifetime. And so what we would like to see is that, does it translate? Is there any time where there would be adaptation to the intervention, whether microbial or otherwise? And so we need to know over a longer period of time whether it is if a dairy is over a lactation or 2 lactations if it stays, and then if it is a beef cattle, maybe from weaning up to the harvest time. When you continuously give this interventions, whether there is any unintended consequences that we did not pick up when we did this efficacy trials in a controlled environment. So that's really the main reason, is that over a long period of time, does it hold? What we see in 4 months, does it hold in, say, 18 months?
Yeah, it's good. We had hosted a few other people talking in similar manner or similar realm, right, of the discussion here in the podcast. And some of them were talking about the genetic selection for cattle that are more efficient, so they're trying to go that route. Now we have this feed additives, and we also know that some management strategies can be very useful and helpful on achieving this goal. So, is there any of these strategies there better? Are they complementary? How do you see those playing a role?
Yeah, so definitely there are some complementary ideas that would be on a long term would be very, very useful. For example, the breeding and selecting animals for low methane, I think it has a long-term good strategy, because once you achieve that, it is cumulative, and you don't have to worry about feed additive to give it on a daily basis. So over a longer period of time, you will have animals that are naturally low emitting. The window that we have for that is limited, because you're really relying on the animal-to-animal variation, so what that naturally exists, and it may not be over 20% differences there. So you should be able to pick up those things, and it has been shown in New Zealand with sheep, for example, that they were able to come up with a breed of sheep that would have less methane, about 12% or so methane than sort of the control animals. So this is definitely a worthwhile thing to do, because, as I said, a lot of the animals, once you have this, you don't need to do any other extra intervention. And particularly for grazing animals, this is really important, because a lot of the grazing animals, you won't be able to see them on a daily basis to give them feed additives and that. So if you already have something like that, then it would be easy to implement. And others, like vaccines, also would be quite important, because, again, most animals get vaccinated for one thing or another. And if you add this antimethanogenic vaccine there as well, then you can reach a lot more animals than you would do with feed additives. So those kind of things would work. And in low-income countries, low-middle-income countries, feed additives and others may not be as important, because we do have quite a big productivity gap. And if you are able to close that productivity gap, then it would be good for the farmers. It would be good for the environment, because for a kilogram of milk or per unit of meat or any animal product, you have less amount of methane. So before we go into other kind of interventions in those countries where 80% of emission is coming from. So the focus there is to really increase the productivity and reduce the emission intensity. And that's what was achieved in the US and Europe and other Western countries, was basically improvement in the productivity in breeding, nutrition, management. All of that contributed to animals having a better outcome. And then per unit of production, they have much less now. So the US, for example, reduced dairy herd from 25 million to 9 million over the last 50 years. But the milk production, the total milk production has actually increased. But if you look at the unit per kilogram of milk or per liter of milk, now we have much less emissions than we have before, like 50% less emissions than we had before. So that's where the big jump could happen in low and middle income countries in the short term.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, because this brings to like a topic that and a question that we usually have, and there's a lot of misconception around the methane emission and what's the impact and what really it's out there. So what are some of those most challenging misconception that you, as one of the leading experts on this topic, has been facing, and what are basically the myth busters, like to respond to it, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I notice is that how much contribution that animals really have on the methane emission on the environment. And I teach this course on sustainable animal production, and I ask students that before we start, to just guess what is the contribution of animals, and they usually come up way higher, about 30-40% and all that. So I think people are thinking that the contribution of enteric methane, particularly from ruminants, is much larger than what actually is. And it really depends on where you are also. Like in the US, for example, the contributions are 2 to 3% or lower, while in other places where they have higher amount of livestock and not as productive, then that contribution goes higher. But overall, global basis, 14.5% from livestock, and including a lot of the things, not just enteric but other emissions as well. And that also includes the land use change as well. So if you take that out, it goes even smaller. So yeah, it's important. It's important enough for us to worry and to do something about it. But then we have to put it into perspective as well.
Yeah, no, that's something. It's good to make that clear and to bring that up as much as we can, because we hear there's a lot of pushback and there's a lot of things that we hear, and that sometimes it's just not the truth or the reality. So it's good to hear this. So in the interest of time and to our listeners, we're coming up to the end of our pocket-sized podcast, which is a shorter one. I'm really glad that we had the chance to catch up with you and learn a little bit more and hear from you and your perspective. And it seems like there's a lot of new things will come up and a lot of opportunity on this field.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a very, very exciting time for working in this field, because as you said, there are a lot of different ways in which we can make an impact. And on a monthly basis, you can see a lot of papers being published. And I think what we need to do now is from the research into the field and actually applying those solutions.
And it seems that we're much closer to that point than we were even just 2 years ago. So it's a good progress. Yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for coming here and sharing your knowledge and your perspectives with our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This concludes another episode of the Dairy Health Blackbelt Podcast, presented to you by Wisenetics. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a message, a review, Send us feedback if you have any topics that you'd like us to discuss in the future. And I'll see you next time. This is the Dairy Health Blackbelt Podcast, and I'm Luciano Caixeta. Thank you. Bye.